My mom really loved taking pictures of us kids. And I think that was the seed. Her, mostly black and white. She had two 35 millimeter cameras. And as a teenager, I ended up with one. But once I got a hold of that camera, everything changed. I didn't know much of anything. I sort of taught myself, the beginning of using a camera. And I realized I loved it. I loved being outside. I loved the discovery. I don't think hard reality was anything I wanted to achieve in photography. It wasn't about capturing exactly what was there in sharp, beautiful detail from the beginning. That's why I went through this whole period of, infrared film and hand coloring and turn it into something different than, the pure photographic reality. So I think abstracting it even further is just a natural progression for me as an artist, to seeing beyond that. And I think that's where painting got attractive again. It was one step further from the reality that, photography is sort of connected to. I guess I've used painting with my photography pretty much from the start. Hand coloring was a good 15 years worth of, applying oil paint on the actual photograph. And that was pretty satisfying in terms of, I love color. I love adding color. I love mixing color and looking at color. But I wasn't so keen on color photography at that time. Then digital came along. Thank God, because I was ready for a change. I don't know if I'd still be a photographer today if I was doing the same thing. I couldn't do the same thing anymore. I was sort of exhausted that. So it did open up a lot of things. And I could shoot more. And that was, I'm still shooting more. You can just shoot forever. One thing I really like about the encaustic is you can show these with no frame. I've kind of gotten used to my images with no frame, so they're not kind of boxed in. So then I apply the wax hot. It's about 200 to 225 degrees, and I paint it on, and then fuse each layer with a heat gun. Yeah, in between, you get ripples and things you don't like, and I use cabinet scrapers to scrape it down and then refuse and repaint. I started the encaustic paint when I was doing some collage work. I learned about it, and I thought, well, I'll try it on some of my color pictures, and ding, it added to it. It added a depth and a beautiful, luscious finish that I'm still doing today, and that's been 15 years now. I normally do about 4 layers of encaustic wax on a photograph. Give or take, it depends on how much I scrape in between. It could be up to 8 or 9. This particular piece ended up, I tried something new with going 2 directions on it, and it was a little confusing, and I had to cover up some stuff I didn't like, so I ended up putting some pigment on at the end. A lot of white pigment you can see in here. It's not obvious. I don't want it to be obvious, but I felt like it helped give a little depth to it. Wax, the beeswax will create a bloom, and so we polish our art to take that matte
finish of it off.
There's a drive that is really hard to explain. It makes me feel alive to go out early, late in the afternoon, and see what's out there on the water. Because it changes. I think it's the change of this subject matter that attracts me most. It changes second by second. It's never the same. I don't know. It makes me feel alive. After about 4 years shooting the ocean, suddenly I saw something different happening. And it was kind of an aha moment, being on a train in France that was going along the shoreline. It was barely any light, but I just sat there with my camera at half a second and just kept shooting, just shot for an hour as we rolled along. And when I got home and looked at those images, I'm like, wow, this is kind of great. I realized it was one more element. You've got the ocean moving. You've got me moving. Now all of a sudden, I'm moving on a train. And, you've got the variable of the shutter speed, the ocean, me. It was all piling together, creating these beautiful color fields. So that was the beginning of the sea glass. And my daughter actually named it sea glass. She goes, these are like sea glass colors. And I said, oh, I'll just use that as a title. So I went back through thousands of images and started looking for that. Most of them were like mistakes. Oh, I think there's something to this image. And then I started shooting more like that, like panning and adding myself moving. I got off the tripod quite a bit, got off the tripod. The fun was obvious, just marching around with lots of cameras and sort of shooting on the fly. So this was real, like an intentional thing. Sometimes I don't bring a tripod to the beach. And I still shoot randomly at long exposures too. More than 90% of the images are crap. But there's that one that just turns out magical in a more abstract way. And that's part of the sea glass beauty. But it did take a lot of shooting. Sometimes I'll shoot 1,000 images in a day, and maybe one of them looks usable. I took a painting, not sure why, except that I like looking at painting. I like the textural quality of painting. I wanted to do it. I thought about doing it. I would go to bed dreaming about doing it, but that's not painting. You can think about painting all your life and never put a stroke of paint on anything. So I had to like dive in and do it. Painting to me has turned into kind of an experimental creative process. I don't have a lot of parameters for it, except to have fun and learn something. And to just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. I usually paint on, just a canvas stretched on a wall, not in a frame. I don't like, they're too soft usually at that size. They just cause too much bounce, I think is what it's called. So it also solves the problem of storage. I can roll these up. I just roll them up into little tubes. I guess this is probably, I'm not a watercolor. I've never really done watercolor painting, but this might be maybe I should have learned something. There's a few things about painting that the worst part and the best part are the same thing. It's that feeling of a loss of control. And that's really exciting. That's part of why I do it. It's not knowing where you're going, but it is also it can be a very frustrating part of the process. You kind of got to accept a certain amount of drips or you drive yourself crazy. I don't want too many drips. Be one of those overly dripped looks. Let's look back. Okay. You have to kind of live with that frustration and accept it. I think if anything about painting, that frustration's okay. I think if your intention while you're painting is, I don't like a lot of intention. That will cause frustration because it never is perfect. More intention just can take all the fun out of it. I want a little variations on this hard black, but I want it dark, so I'm going to add some brown here. So I really like this, how the white blends through the color, and it's really not white anymore. It picks up some of the color. So like you're staining, the whites get stained, but you know they're whites. I will probably in the very end go over some of the whites to make them pop a little. So as you can see, I don't have any hard edges. I think it's a lot like my pictures that generally don't have a lot of right angles and hard edges. And as my husband says, I can't, even with a ruler, I can't draw a straight line. The painting I'm working on right now, I think I get more inspired to do this in the winter. I just did a whole bunch of shoots on the ocean when there's big waves. And you go out there and spend a few days with them, and you get them in your head. You just keep feeling that motion and the forms that they constantly create. I can be out there for 6, 7 hours at a time. And believe me, that sticks with you. And so the forms that I never tire of, the curves and the forms and the freedom in the water. And that's what I'm trying to do on this painting, I guess. In an abstract way, I don't want the perfect wave, or I just want that feeling of flow and motion. You know, I think it would take another 50 years to really perfect painting. I started later. You know, I didn't start when I was young. And you need those tens of thousands of hours. But I look at it more as a joy. And that's where I am today. I've lived in San Francisco for almost 4 decades. And I'd go to the ocean, I'd take some pictures, and never was really satisfied with my results. I would try, and then I kind of got into rivers for a while. I shot a lot of rivers and streams and went to the Delta, and shot the bay. And that was great. That was a good 5, 6 years of that. And it was water. I was just so attracted to the water. So finally, it was, I think, about 6 years ago, I'm seriously going to try to do this. My daughter had gone to college, and I had time finally on my hands to dig into something. So with much purpose, I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to see where it goes. And I went to Oregon for a couple weeks, and that was the beginning. I think that was 2014. And it just continued, and it kept changing. I feel really lucky that I've kind of had a love affair with the camera for so long, for 4 decades, and I still find it a fascinating activity and means of creation. I think the ocean really kind of sealed that, because it all felt to me very new. You know, like the sea glass and all this kind of coming together slowly because of what I discovered in the camera, even this many years later. I love seeing the world through the lens. And I think what I strive now is to make the camera see what I want, not depend on Photoshop. Well, I do depend on Photoshop. You know, it's my tool to get it out of the on paper. But to get 90% of that in camera is where I'm at right now. So maybe just lighten some lights and I'd be ready either way. So this is what I like, almost straight out of the camera. Photography has really taken care of my whole life. It's a means of making money and making me happy and my creative outlet. I mean, what more can you ask of what you want to do? But it also put a lot of pressure on it too. You know, I earn a living doing this. Yet I don't feel like I have compromised much of anything to make it sellable. I love beautiful imagery, and I think the world does too.